Good morning, guys, and welcome to the very first Floss Tube episodes here on the Cora's Quilts YouTube channel. My name is Shelley Cavanna, and I am a quilt pattern and textile designer, and I write quilting books like the Barnstar Sampler and the Flower Farm Sampler. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, wait, why are you sharing cross-stitch projects? This is a quilting channel. Like so many of you, I am a multidisciplined maker. And while the majority of what I make happens to be quilts, I am also lately rather obsessed with cross-stitch projects. And now that we have this new studio, we've just moved in last week, and we have a regular filming space available to us, I thought that it would be fun to join the FlossTube community here on YouTube and share with you some of the projects that I've been stitching on. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back and enjoy a little bit of sewing time while I share with you all of the cross-stitchy goodness going on here in the studio. So about this time last year, I was in the midst of developing a new fabric collection. So this fabric collection would go on to be named Among the Wildflowers Volume 1. And with this new Among the Wildflowers collection, what I wanted to do is put together kind of a smaller capsule collection, meaning that instead of having two distinct color families, I wanted to put together a collection based solely on this kind of spring berry color palette. This main print here has a lighter colorway as well, where it's kind of more whites and focused more kind of on the pastel corals and kind of the yellows. And then we bring in some really lovely medium scale blender prints. So you can see it's a really kind of crisp collection, lots of bright whites, a few kind of small and medium scale prints, and then we go into this lovely array of blender just to give kind of a great color range of dark, medium, and light prints all in the same color collection. You can see it's just a really lovely collection of kind of spring to summer pastel prints that are just really gorgeous and just really remind me of being out in nature and kind of slow hand stitching and just kind of just a lovely spring afternoon. And I knew really early on when I was developing this collection that I wanted a really soft and summery quilt sampler to showcase kind of the range of colors and tones. And after a lot of sketching, came out with the Summerhaven sampler, which is a brand new quilt pattern that will be hitting shops again in September and October. And almost immediately, as soon as I had finalized all of the details for this quilt, I could picture myself spending an afternoon sitting on this blanket in a field of wildflowers, sewing on some sort of a hand-working project. And I immediately knew that this project needed something that we could stitch along with, in addition to piecing the quilt itself, because the quilt itself is 90 inches by 90 inches, so it's just about a queen size quilt. And so I knew immediately that I wanted to have some sort of a cross-stitch project or a paper piecing project, something like that. But then that idea kind of got lost in the back burner of my brain. I spent last fall finishing the manuscript for my next book. And then over the winter, I pieced the 7 quilts and did all of the video content for all of the quilts in the book. And so this kind of stitchy co-project, if you will, kind of went on the back burner. After about 9 months of this kind of bubbling away in the back of my brain, I pulled this print out again and was determined to kind of iron out the details of what I wanted to do for the companion project. And initially, I thought I was going to do some sort of a cross-stitch pattern that had some sort of a floral motif that pulled some of my favorite elements from this main print, and that the cross-stitch pattern itself would go along with the fabric. And so I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go, and so I literally went to my local big box store with this print and kind of just started pulling all of the thread. This is just DMC thread. Pulling all of the threads that kind of matched the colors that I was seeing here in the fabric collection. And I brought them home, and sat down, and I do all of my cross stitch design in Max Stitch. And I just kind of sat with this for a while and did some preliminary drawing, did some preliminary charts, and I just couldn't come up with a project that made me happy. And so instead, I pulled out my quilt again when it dawned on me that this quilt would actually make a really fantastic cross-stitch project, the quilt itself, not the fabric design. And I was so excited about this, and I get such a dopamine rush from starting any new project. And so I was like, okay, I have to start this like yesterday. I was so excited. And so once I got the framework of this project set up, I kind of picked and pulled some of the threads in a good variety, I thought, of colors from my stash from the big box store, and just kind of plunked them into place, kind of mimicking how the fabrics were used in the quilt, but not quite. And I was in such a hurry, and the colors look a bit different on the screen than they do when you're actually starting, that I kind of was a little bit hasty. So I kind of just plunked the colors in and then packed my bag, including this new cross-stitch project, and we took off on vacation. And between 2 5-hour flights and several rainy afternoons, I got a really decent amount of stitching done. And so by the time we were landing from our second 5-hour flight and our 2 weeks of vacation, I had pretty much finished the center panel and had started on the lighter version of these kind of X's around the border. And when I got home and looked at things kind of under my studio light and kind of looked at the picture as a whole, I realized that I kind of had flooded the design with too much of this kind of medium coral color here. So you can see it doesn't really look like it in the original mock-up that I had done. This was my original plan. But it was this kind of mid-tone that I had flooded the design with. And it just felt like it was just kind of muddy and dull. And the more I looked at it, the more I just didn't like it. And so I decided to pull in the second mid-tone here. So you can kind of see, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between these on the screen. And so I went around and I included this second kind of light raspberry color here in the X's around the border. And I liked it so much better. I thought it gave a lot of visual interest, and it kind of made the whole work seem less muddy and a little more visually interesting. And so I liked this part, but then I realized that I had also used this color for the tulips around the border. And now again, it was looking like it was going to be too light. And so what I thought I was going to do, it kind of dawned on me that in my threads, aside from the greens and the yellows, we'll just ignore these, that I had that I had 3 distinct color groups. I kind of had 2 of these light corals, which you can barely even tell the difference on, between on the fabric. And then I had these 2 mid-tones, and then I had these 2 kind of darker tones. And so what I decided to do was make some changes in the project and kind of work in these like 3 distinct color groups. So these lighter tones were going to be my highlight colors. And really the only time that I'm using this palest color is here in the little hearts of the tulips around. And if I were to do it again, I would probably switch it to this darker color, but I don't really feel like doing that whole part again. So those were my light highlight colors. And then these midtones would be kind of the X's around the edges. And I'd use a mix of the midtones and the darker tones for my larger flower pieces. And so I did the outer border of the tulips using the 2 darker colors. And I don't know how well it's translating on the screen. It's kind of a cloudy day here at the studio, so the lighting is not optimal. But I definitely do think that this outer border here looks so much better using that darker midtone rather than the lighter midtone. So I am going to go back and frog. Is it called frog? Frog is knitting, so I'm not sure what you call tearing out your cross stitch. I'm going to de-stitch carefully these lighter colors in the tulips around the edge and use this darker color as well. And as I came up with that plan, last night I was sitting in my chair. We were watching soccer and I was stitching. And originally this center flower here had used the lighter of the two dark tones. So initially that center flower had used the lighter of the two tones. And I decided to rip it out and I'm going to use this darkest tone instead because I think it's going to really serve to kind of anchor the center of my work and kind of provide like a starting space for your eyes. And so as I go to finish my quilt, I'm going to be using the darker of those two dark colors in the center and in the four corners, and then I will fill in the edges with the lighter of the two threads. So there's the dark and the light. You can see we kind of got a little bit of a start right there. And once I had decided on that, I knew also the original plan had been to use the two lightest colors for the little rosettes around the perimeter of the quilt. And these two threads are they're just too close in color to use side by side. And so rather than have some blobs that didn't really show off the design, instead I decided to use one light tone and one medium tone around the border edge for these flowers. And I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And finally, to kind of counteract all of this warmer, kind of more muted of the mid-tone colors, I decided to pull in this little motif with the dark center. And rather than adding just a straight kind of X like I had originally designed in the pattern, I'm going to pull in this motif around the perimeter in the corners here and in between my little plus signs there. So I am super happy with the way that this project is turning out. I just love it so much and I just want to work on it all the time. And I haven't decided yet though if I am going to add a border around. I'm thinking that I will because I feel like the design just needs something kind of to finish it and hold it in place. So I'm thinking to finish the project that I most likely am going to add some sort of a really gentle kind of thinnish border, almost something that mocks the look of like a quilt binding, that I will finish the project off with something simple just like that. So as it stands right now, this project is 178 stitches wide by 178 stitches tall. We have a color palette of 9 DMC colors. I wanted to make it as friendly and accessible to everybody as possible, and so we've got this lovely small palette with just 9 threads of DMC, which is readily available. And then I am stitching my project on a Zweigart 14 count Ada in white. It looks a little dingy here on camera because of today's lighting, but I went with such a big size and just a plain white because I really wanted it to really just have that kind of classic cross stitch feel. So we will be releasing this cross stitch pattern in digital and print formats a little later this fall. And because I know a lot of you are interested in cross stitch but are new to it as well, we've put together a very small number of kits that have all 9 of the floss colors along with your choice of the Zweigart, either the Ada at 14 count or I think I have a 32 count white Zweigart Lugana as well, which is kind of a smaller weave and a little bit less of that cross stitch look and a little bit more of that kind of linen look that's also really popular. So we'll be releasing the patterns and the thread kits and the fabric kits a little later this fall. But because we are starting the quilt block of the month, I don't know where my quilt pattern cover went. Because we'll be starting the quilt pattern block of the month most likely in January of 2025, we most likely will host a sew along right alongside the quilt along. So if you're interested in trying cross stitch, you can sew your block and then stitch the stitch version of the block in your cross stitch sampler right alongside. And normally I kind of like to start my cross stitch projects in the upper left hand corner. But with this project, I absolutely started in the center because it was a really good place to kind of build all my other blocks off of. And the quilt itself is assembled in that kind of round robin kind of fashion from the center and then in rounds around it. And so I thought doing a stitch along and a quilt along side by side would be super, super fun. And the thing that I really, really love about this project is it's not one of those quilt charts or cross stitch charts rather that you have to pay a whole lot of attention to as you're sewing. I was just looking at the chart to make sure I'm in the right color scheme and that I'm starting in the right place. But kind of once you stitch one of these blocks, then it's a really easy stitch to just kind of keep going on and stitching all the remaining blocks. So it's a really easy pattern to memorize. And I'm so excited about it. I can't wait to work on it some more over the weekend. And I hope that you will have as much fun sewing along with it and sewing and making the sampler as I have. Now, speaking of samplers, I pulled this lovely collection of threads that are slightly tangled. I pulled this lovely collection of threads to go with another upcoming fabric collection. And so if you can guess that the last collection I showed you was Among the Wildflowers Volume 1, then you might have some guesses as to what we'll be sharing with you next month, which I'm super excited about. But it dawned on me as I pulled these threads and I started working on a project that I can't share with you just yet today, that these colors were a gorgeous fit for a block of the month project we're actually starting in September on my website. So this is our Frost Flowers block of the month project. It is a 12-month project that will be starting in September, and this project finishes at 100 inches square. So it's a really nicely, generously sized, somewhere in between a queen and a king size quilt. And I put together some of my favorite starry quilt blocks and put them all together with this lovely, I'm such a sucker for a good Irish chain quilt setting. And so we have this lovely Irish chain wintry quilt that we will be starting next month sewing together. And it dawned on me after I did all of that work with the last sampler that we could make this into a really fantastic cross-stitch block of the month project as well. So I'm super excited. We will be releasing the Frost Flowers cross-stitch project in digital form next month in September and in printed form a little later in the fall. And so if you are sewing along in Frost Flowers with us in the block of the month project, or if you just want to make the cross-stitched version of this, we are going to be starting another sew along with that next month. So I'm really excited about this project, and it is a fairly uncomplicated project to start if you are new to cross stitching. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to put together a quilt block and then put together the corresponding thread stitch part in my stitchy sampler as well. So I got a start on my content, and I am going a little outside of my comfort zone for my own project. Rather than stitching on an Aida again, I decided to go a little bit smaller. I think that this piece Whereas the Summerhaven project, I'm pretty sure is going to be a pillow. This piece is one that I'm probably going to hang on the wall in my studio. And so I went a little bit smaller for this piece, and I'm just starting this center block here so that I have some space to kind of build off of the motif, because I am using a 32 count Lugana, which is almost like linen without all of the slubs of a linen, but it is a small fabric weave. And so I really like how delicate it is. I am stitching with 2 strands of floss over 2 threads of the fabric. And so it gives it this really lovely kind of chubby, squishy stitch feel that I am so in love with. And so we will be starting a quilt along. So there are 25 blocks in both the quilt pattern and in the stitched version of the sampler. And so next month I will be sharing more information on our newsletter and here on our YouTube channel about how you can stitch along with. But to start things off, and because I'm using such a tiny fabric weave, I decided to go ahead and do my very first block here in the center. And then I most likely will start stitching the quilt block to match whatever block I'm sewing for the month. So we are still ironing out the details of that. And so in a couple more weeks, I will have some information for you as well. But to make things easy, we did put together these floss packs that go along with the pattern, and they're just so beautiful on the white fabric. And we'll have more information on this sew along and how to get the digital pattern, how to order your fabric or order your thread if you'd like to do that through us rather than pull from your stash. We'll be sharing that with our newsletter in just a week or 2. If you want to make sure that you're getting that newsletter, there's a link down in the description box below with where you can sign up for that. So that is it for the projects that I can show you right now. Once our next fabric collection comes out in mid-October, we'll have a few more projects that we can share for you then. But I thought I would share, because I know that 2 projects makes for kind of a measly floss tube video. I thought I'd share what's kind of up and next, what I will be kind of stitching along in my spare time. So I spent most of 2024 working on first the projects for my new book, and over the summer I spent about 3 weeks total doing some really intensive editing sprints. So a lot of mental work power, and I personally am not that great at rewarding myself after any sort of a big project is done. I get the rush of accomplishment from starting a new project, not finishing. So I'm trying to kind of make the finish of projects exciting. And so I promised myself that once I finished all this editing, my reward would be getting to start a new cross-stitch project. And so I originally was going to choose between these 2 patterns from Carolyn Manning Designs. I really love them. They remind me of quilts, but so much more intricate than a quilt I would want to make, but they're beautiful and I love them. And the idea was that I was going to pick 1 or 2 of these projects to start and use the threads that I had pulled for several other of my projects. You can see they all kind of play really nicely together, the color families do. And the idea was that I was going to pick 1 or 2 of these projects and pick some of the thread palettes that I'm using for my other projects and work on something that was just purely for my own enjoyment. I just moved into a brand new studio space, and I'm excited to start kind of putting some decorations on the wall. And eventually I'd like to have a wall in my office that is all cross-stitch projects hanging in the hoop. And I want them to have some sort of a cohesion, not necessarily because they're similar projects, but I think the cohesion that I'm looking for is in the colors that I'm using to stitch them. And so the idea is to pull the colors from the other projects I'm working on and make 1 or 2 of these projects to go along with them, so they'll all look lovely hanging on my wall. And so as I was thinking about which one I wanted to start and how I wanted to go about recoloring them, I came across another Floss Tube episode by Liz Matthews from Hello from Liz Matthews. And the day that I came across it was the last day to get this Busy Hands Happy Heart pattern as part of her monthly Patreon subscription. So I ran across the office, went and subscribed, and I got this pattern that I love just so much. So if you've seen this project on Liz's channel, you'll know it's just a gorgeous, it's got that, to me, kind of that like boho macrame kind of lovely handmade style. And the project itself comes as instructions for a cross stitch pillow and a cross stitch pattern. And so I am definitely planning on making the pillow for sure, and most likely will make this cross stitch pattern as well. So the thing that makes this pillow so exciting is that she has stitched it on, I believe, 20 count linen, and she stitched it with I think 3 threads over 2 strands of fabric. So you get this really chunky pillow. And you'll hopefully see in an upcoming studio vlog or 2 that I have a gorgeous new filming background here in my studio with a lot of really empty shelves that I need to fill. So my first thought was making this lovely pillow. I think that it comes out to be about 20 inches by 8 inches, depending on the fabric that you use. The exact dimensions are in her pattern. But I thought that would be a really lovely piece to sit on the bookshelf behind me in the springtime while I'm sewing. So I am branching out from my white Aida background, which is what I've always used in the 30 plus years, 35 years I've been cross stitching. I am branching out from my white Aida. I'm using, again, the Lugana for the Wildflowers project. And then for this project, I ordered, I ordered some Weeks Dye Works in a 20 count red pear, which on my screen looks to be a little bit darker than this corally print that is in my new fabric collection coming up. So I thought it would be kind of a lovely blend, this red pear, to kind of go with some of the prints that are going to be on my bookshelf in my filming studio for the next 6 months as well. So we'll be doing that in the 20 count red pear. I think 3 or 4 strands of floss over 2 strands of the linen, which makes it like a 10 count fabric. I think it's going to be fabulous and amazing. And I most likely will back it with one of the prints from the fabric collection. Hopefully they'll be here in my studio in a couple weeks, right about the same time that the linen arrives, so I'll be able to pick which one. And then I really love this cross stitch motif, this cross stitch project. I'd love to have it hanging on my wall or have it in a different color. I'm trying to change up the backdrop of my filming setup every, I wouldn't say quarterly, but maybe twice a year. And so I am going to make this project as well in some sort of a blue colorway that's kind of really mimicking the colors that I picked from here. So I got 2 prints, or 2 pieces of linen rather, on their way. I got a Zweigart linen in navy. And then I also got a linen in what's called the Petrol blue Cashel. And so these are kind of the colors. It's kind of a real dark indigo blue and then a real deep teal. So I will use one of those 2 as the background for my own Busy Hands Happy Heart sampler there. And I most likely will be stitching, I can't remember the thread that I used. So you will have to tune in next time when I hopefully have some progress to share on these 2 projects. So I want to thank you so very much for stopping by and joining me for today's Floss Tube episode. I hope that, like me, you really enjoy not only quilting, but some of the hand stitching that also celebrates the art. And I hope you'll join me on our upcoming sew-alongs this fall. Again, if you need information on any of our quilt patterns or any of the projects that you've seen here in the video, we've left links to everything down in the description box below, and I will see you in another week or two, maybe 3, for another Floss Tube episode. Until then, happy sewing. Thanks so much for watching our Floss Tube series. To see more of our quilting adventures, you can find us on Instagram as Cora's Quilts. Don't forget to stop by our website and sign up for our emailed newsletter to hear all about the happenings in our studio. We'll send you 2 free quilt patterns to say thanks for signing up. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon with another studio vlog.